Now, you will probably already have some idea about the kind of damage that could be caused by a nuclear attack on this island. And you may already know a little about the ways with which the Civil Defense Corps, along with the other services, now, between the complex structure of civil defense control, with all its highly trained resources, and the mass population of this country, untrained and uninformed, there is one vital link: the Civil Defense Warden. Without that link, effective control would be impossible. Life-saving teams would not be deployed to the best advantage, and chaos would ensue. With his local knowledge of people, of facts and figures about his post area, and a sound understanding of the problems involved, the warden would be intensely active in times of war and in that tension-laden period of emergency that might precede it. There would be no time for him then to acquire his specialist knowledge. He must be fully trained during the days of peace, while there's still time to do so. The warden's duties are very exacting, very arduous, and very varied. Many thousands of lives might rest in his hands. His is a responsibility which must be understood by all and never be taken for granted. Now, you who have volunteered but have not yet made your choice of section, or you who have already made it, would be well advised to consider the training, the peacetime training that lies before you. However, no matter how much training a warden receives, he would not be able to carry out his task effectively unless he has an intimate and detailed knowledge of the area for which he is responsible. You will therefore be asked to get to know the shortest and quickest routes from point to point, to find your way about by day or night, or no matter how badly damaged and unrecognizable your locality may be after a nuclear attack. As part of your training, you must therefore get to know your area like the back of your hand, to know which buildings are likely to stand up best to the effects of blast, and those that could make good communal refuges against fallout. You should observe where the greatest fire risks lie, and which buildings could easily be turned into emergency rest or feeding centers. It might be necessary, in the event of a nuclear attack, for the population in your area to be moved to a district uncontaminated by fallout. You should therefore find out how many private motor coaches and other transport there is in your area which could be made available for clearance purposes in an emergency, and whether there are any bridges with low headroom which might prevent the use of double-decker buses in a clearance operation. You will have to decide which roads would be likely to remain open, which bridges can take the weight of heavy appliances should it be necessary, and if the approaches to and from a bridge would be likely to be blocked to mobile forces after a burst. You must know how to get quickly to your sector post so that you can report there if your telephone is out of action, where your street leaders live, and whether there are any industrial civil defense units in your area. You should also know where the nearest police station is, who is the local doctor, and where the district nurse is to be found. During the precautionary period that might precede a state of national emergency, and only then, the warden would have to complete a household register. For example, you would have to find out who lives at number 18. How many are there still in there? Are there any handicapped or sick people or children living there? Have they got a car? And where is their refuge room? This business of knowing your area cannot be taken lightly. Very many lives might depend on your having the correct information at the right time. In the last war, World War II, many people survived only because the wardens knew exactly where they had taken refuge or shelter. As a first step in your training, you will be taught the protective measures that can be taken against the immediate dangers from a nuclear explosion: heat flash, gamma radiation, and the effects of blast. You will also learn of the unseen residual danger from a nuclear explosion, radioactive fallout, and how to obtain protection from it. It is important that you, the warden, should know exactly what to do immediately after a nuclear attack. To this end, you will be taught what information should be given first priority in your reports, with particular reference to casualties and damage which might threaten life. After an attack, the warden would have time, before fallout arrived, to carry out a brief reconnaissance of the area around his post, paying particular attention to hazards that might obstruct the entry of mobile forces. His reports would have to be shrewd and accurate assessments of the local situation if they were to be of any real value to control. At the same time that he made his reconnaissance, he would do his best to aid and organize survivors to save life and property. To help him in this, he will be trained in first aid and will be able to help others to take in and care for those who are injured. Fire! He will be taught how to fight fires and in turn to encourage others in tackling outbursts before they lead to a serious fire hazard. He will be taught the do's and don'ts of entering and passing through damaged buildings, rules that, if broken, can result in needless loss of life, both to him and to those unfortunates trapped within. He will also be taught light rescue in order to get the trapped and injured to a place of safety. He will be trained to use the appropriate radiac instruments for reading his personal dose, as well as to report back the dose rate for his district. The readings given to him by these two instruments tell him how long he can remain in the open, and he must learn to put his trust, indeed his life, in the readings of his dosimeter and radiac survey meter. At the same time that the warden made his reconnaissance during the vital period before fallout arrived, the public would be fighting local fires, helping the injured, and, if need be, moving them to alternative shelter. As soon as the warden's radiac survey meter registered a significant dose rate in the open, he would give a local warning by whistle to order all those in the open to refuge as soon as possible. He would then return to his post and make his report. To save time, to make sure that no points are overlooked, and to ensure that reports conform to the same sequence, the warden will be taught the reporting code. He will also be taught the 24-hour clock, the NATO phonetic alphabet, and the list of abbreviations to be used in connection with reporting. When life-saving teams arrived in the warden's area, they would depend on him for getting instant and correct information. In this respect, he will be taught to brief others. It might be an ambulance or first aid officer or a rescue officer sent in to help, needing accurate particulars to help them carry out their task, warning them of any local hazards, telling them of the most suitable location for ambulance loading points, and advising them of the present dose rate in the vicinity. In more rural areas, or in towns or cities less likely to be attacked, the warden will be instructed in the means of warning the public against entering the zones of varying radiation intensity affected by radioactive fallout alone. He will be taught the drill for starting limited release of the public from their homes after the necessary initial period spent in refuge is over. Warning signs would have to be posted. His street leaders would have to be briefed so that the public in his area were kept informed of the situation and told how long they could stay in the open if they had to go out. And he might have to assist the local food organization in distributing essential food supplies. If his post was in a reception area, he would be called upon to guide and advise people who had been moved out from places more severely affected by fallout. In this, he will learn to cooperate, for example, with the welfare section and the police. But wherever his post may be, most important of all are his duties towards the public, the householders, the individual men and women who live around him. In time of emergency, he would be their main source of information and their guide. He is the one person, the only person apart from the police, to whom they would be instructed to turn for help and advice. They would put their trust and their lives in his hands. This quality of leadership, which is expected from the wearer of a warden's uniform, is perhaps the most difficult to teach. It is for this reason that the warden must be a man who is fully prepared to accept this great responsibility and who would not shirk it if the time came. Now, you must never forget that the road leading to the fully trained warden is not an easy one. With the lack of urgency that is inherent in these happy days of peace, that road may sometimes seem endless and lacking in wayside drama. But if we are to survive a nuclear war, and survive it we can and must, then we have no choice but to prepare and plan through the medium of a highly trained, efficient, and responsible warden section.